So if we look at happiness and we say that happiness is an amount of being carefree, do we say that in this carefree state, there exists a wise man and each of these wise men are as though the ones who know of a foreign land, which means that in each state there is a man who wouldn't necessarily be in a poor state, but wouldn't necessarily be carefree. And this man serves as a point in which the system in which is being looked upon has then reached an end. Which means that if these systems can reach an end, then there is a place from which all systems would merely be an arrangement of levels of energies and would this man who sees all these systems as an arrangement of energies with levels be like a state himself? In which we could actually ask, what is a poor state? For the poor state itself would only be when there would be something to be known that exists which does not exist in your state. Otherwise, the man would have no recollection of being poor. Then this man is like the beginning of each of these systems. Which, when we consider the wise man, who would be like unto the end of each system, do we then consider this state like a child who throws tantrums? But we say, what does a child know? But that a child is closer to the state from which states themselves come from. Then we can say that those who are carefree must be those who are carefree must be in the midst of a state. Then by this, we could say that not only is man in a state, but that man can be in the midst of a state that man can be in the midst of a state of another state. Which means that when we look at the states of man and we compare the regions by which these levels of energies give us the perception of the beginning and the ending of a state, we can then say that these states of happiness, which are then given names other than being a name which denotes a state of being, but rather a state of area, we can relate states by then saying that if there exists states of happiness, then these states are predictions. And if the state of happiness itself relies upon the prediction of a state, and how relatable it is to a man amidst a state, we can then say if a man is at the beginning of a state or at the end of a state. Then if these states of happiness rely upon predictions, we can look at our state and say that the amount of happiness in our state is only relatable to these other states of happiness by a comparison that accounts for predictability, which would mean that these faraway states are only states of happiness if they are predictable. Which would mean that in our state, if carefreeness is by an amount of being amidst a state, that we are in a poor state or entering into a new state, when we begin to look at the predictability of other states. Then we could be like the wise man in our state, then the wise man exists in the poor state and at the richest state of each state. For then, if predictability is what makes the poor state seem wise, then by being wise in the rich state, we can be relatable, which means that the notion of happiness in which it relates to a region and its state is relatable to the level of energy in which you have in your current state with relation to either predictability, given lower levels of energy, which would make you wise, or by being wise in the state in which you have great amounts of energy. Then when we look at these states of happiness, we can relate them geographically to what they would offer as an experience based upon an amount of predictability, where then it isn't necessarily that these states are happier, but it is by a prediction that if you either reside in a predictable state or a wise state, that what the state offers is predictable. Whether that be amidst your state or far away from another state. Then, when looking at what a poor state is, or when looking at what inconceivable happiness looks like, one may refer to this as predictability. Where if they were predictable, they would be wise, and the amount of predictability from these states of happiness, which offer representation of something that is predictable there, becomes much more regular. Wherefore, the amount of unpredictability gives rise to a poor state if a man isn't wise, where being wise isn't necessarily being predictable. Then man can deal with predictability and unpredictability. In which case, if a man masters this, any place can be made a place in which being amidst a state is a possible thing to do. Where then what the predictability is of these states of happiness can be seen in a way which gives man the reason to contain uncontrollable happiness and complete and utter sadness through its being unpredictable. Then whatever one would have in a state's beginning or end is set up unto its having which would make the beginning of a state as wise as the end of a state. Where if these states of inconceivable happiness are perceived from a state that isn't wise, they will be seen as states that are out of control and unpredictable. Then either become wise in predictability or become wise in appearance, that the relatability of a state of well-being or its opposite can be seen not as an inconceivable, unrelatable state in which, if things were to exist in, they would have no reason of but that they are the perception of predictability. Given an idea of happiness. And if one masters these ways of being able to be poor and predictable, and therefore wise, or rich and wise, and therefore free, in which case the idea of happiness itself for either would be relatable to the amount of energy which gives the perception of entering into a new state. That allows one to pass from state to state as energy. Then perceiving an idea of many states. Then being amidst the poor man's state, there can be a wise state of seeing the layout of systems. In which one can be amidst this state and be carefree. Then as much as being in the rich man's state, if one is wise, then in being wise, the state of the rich man is seen as a state of wisdom, by the poor man, in which then if the poor man being carefree relies upon predictability, then as long as the rich man continues to be wise, then the poor man should be carefree in that the rich man exists as an idea of happiness until he reaches a low energy state. By which time, if he is wise, he will be able to pass into another state. This is only unless, of course, a man wishes to dissolve the ideas that man has in regards to states of happiness being other states than his own. As an idea that renders distance as a state, and what this state portrays as a notion of predictability, being something relatable to their state. Then also by this, all other states besides these states would be considered odd states by their ability to retain an odd angle, as in a piece, to a predictable state, that when as such comes back around, fits into the state's predictability. Where the amount of conversation that gives a sensation of control and intellectuality is also relatable to the state of predictability and the state of being wise, where if we are to take the idea of there being very complex states that harness very vast and in particular amounts, degrees, or ideas of intelligence that give rise to the witnessing of a state of happiness rather than the playing of a state of happiness in which the more predictability the less there is conversed. Then the idea exists that there is a place which can observe the playing of all interactions as conversation because it is so wise, or in likewise experience the playing of conversation as it is predictable, for it is wise.